Hello, Psych 101 students, and welcome to Module 5, Chapter 7, Learning Objective 3. How do you maintain memories over time? In this learning objective, we will look at long-term storage and organizing long-term storage. So let's begin. So long-term storage is a memory storage system that allows relatively permanent storage of a probably unlimited amount of information. So long-term memories can last a lifetime. They include all the facts, experiences, and skills that we've developed over the course of our lifetime. Many people would be unsure which of these pennies is correct, which of these $10 bills with Alexander Hamilton on there would be correct. Even though you've seen these things, thousands of times, you've come across pennies and $10 bills, but many people will, would get the choice wrong. Are the heads facing left or right? Or by the way, for the pennies, the one on the left is correct. For the $10 bills, the one on the bottom is correct. These are details that you may have failed to initially encode because they didn't carry a lot of meaning. Long-term storage is all about storing, importing meanings of things. As long as you recognize something as a penny, it doesn't really matter to you which way the head faces, or the $10 bill similarly. You just have to recognize it for what it is. And so we often, even though we see things many times, there will always be details that we fail to encode because they're not really important to the meaning of the item. There are two types of rehearsal that we'll talk about here uh, to help encode long-term storage memories. Maintenance rehearsal is not a good way to encode long-term memories. It's using working memory processes to repeat information based on how it sounds, which is auditory information. It provides only shallow encoding of information. So if you just, I want to remember the term maintenance rehearsal, just saying it over and over, maintenance rehearsal, doesn't really help with long-term storage. What you want to engage in is some kind of elaborative rehearsal, or what's more usually called elaborative processing. And this is using working memory processes to think about how new information relates to ourselves or our prior knowledge. And if you think about how something relates to you or relates to something you already know, this involves processing the meaning of the information. That is semantic information. Semantic refers to the meaning of something. So you want to do some kind of processing of what something means in order to store it, create a good long-term storage memory of that item. Elaborative rehearsal provides deeper encoding of information for successful long-term storage. And this here is we're going to look at a study from comes from memory researchers Craik and Lockhart. Craik is Craik, and Lockhart. This comes from a very famous paper where they presented their levels of processing model in the 1972 publication. And here are the results of one of their studies shown on the screen here. Basically, what they did is they had 3 different groups of subjects in this experiment, and each group of subjects saw the same set of words appear on a screen, one after another, and they each saw the words for the same length of time, but each of the groups had a different task when they saw the word. In the first group, the visual group or the case group, They just had to determine, is the word in all capital letters, or is it in lowercase letters? So uppercase or lowercase. So they would press one button if it was uppercase and a different button if it was lowercase. And that's all they had to do for each word. In the acoustic condition or the rhyming condition, they had to decide if the word rhymed with some other target word. So maybe I don't know. They were each word they had to decide whether it rhymed with, let's say, the word tame. And then if they saw game, they would say yes. If they saw house, they would say no. You know, and so this was their task to say yes or no whether it rhymed with another word. In the semantic condition, they were given a fill in the blank sentence, and they had to say whether the word would appropriately fit in the sentence. I don't know what sentences they use, but like imagine something like the blank crossed the street. And then if they saw the word, I don't know, nurse, let's say, and they would think, oh, the nurse crossed the street, that makes sense. And they would say yes. And if it was something like mailbox, they would say, well, the mailbox across the street, well, probably not. Like they would say no, but they had to think, does it fit in the sentence? So in the visual group, they just had to, you know, they had to make a decision based on what the word looked like, uppercase, lowercase. In the acoustic, they had to make a decision based on how the word sounded. In the semantic, you had to think about the meaning of the word to see whether it fits in the sentence. Anyways, so this was their task, and they each went through, once again, the same list of words. They were presented on the screen for the same amount of time. And then there was a surprise memory test at the end of the task. They were asked to recall as many of the words that they saw as possible. So remember, they all saw the same words for the same length of time, but they just, thought about them differently. And you can see the results, the proportion of words recalled. The semantic group recalled, significantly more words than the acoustic or the visual group. The acoustic group was significantly higher than the visual group, which did the worst. And you can see it's there's a significant difference between these proportions. Like it goes from like 30% in the case group up to about 45%, or in the in the rhyming group, and then up to about 75% in the sentence group. And these results suggested that deeper encoding of semantic information, of thinking about the meaning of something, aids in long-term storage. And this is, like I said, this was a famous landmark paper, once again called the Levels of Processing Model, where they talked about that how you process information determines how memorable it is. And these results here certainly apply to studying. So when if you just highlight or reread the text, it's a form of shallow encoding. Whereas if you do something like flashcards or self-testing, it's a form of deeper processing, because it makes you think about the meaning of the information if you test yourself on it. And this is why those are better study methods than just rereading or highlighting or underlining. You have to connect new information to old information in order to make it more memorable. So thinking about how something relates to yourself, or thinking about how it relates to something you already know, is the best way to remember new information. So your book has one of those learning to learn impact pages on page 271. It looks, wrong way. Look like this. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but a few highlights here that you should think deeply about things to improve your performance. You should test yourself by trying to access the material a few hours and then a few days after you read it. It's best to test yourself at different time intervals, even for the same material, to really know, whether you know it well. And also studying with a group by taking turns teaching the material to others helps you process the information more deeply. One of the best ways to really understand something is to teach it to somebody else, because in order to teach something, you have to have a good understanding of it. And in this kind of group work really helps with learning new material. And this is actually one of the purposes of the discussion boards that you participate in this class. It makes you, it's designed to help make you think more deeply about the topic in order to make it more memorable. Okay, so and you make sure you do read this whole thing over on your own. Once again, that's page 271. Long-term versus short-term storage. Long-term storage lasts longer than short-term, has a far greater capacity. That is, it can hold more, and it depends on deep encoding of information. When people are presented with a large number of items, like and told to remember them, and the items are presented one at a time, so there's a long list, and you hear or read one item at a time, and then you get tested for your memory. We can predict which items are remembered best. There are two effects. The primacy effect refers to the better memory people have for items presented at the beginning of the list, and the recency effect refers to the better memory people have for the most recent items, the ones at the end of the list. And this is an illustration here of a typical result in what's known as the serial position effect. You can see the word serial position underneath the graph. Serial position just means where in the list is a word. Like, so does it have, like, the first word would have serial position 1, and the 15th word, would be serial position 15. So this is from left to right is like the order of the words in the list. And this serial position effect, this is a very typical way that these graphs look after a study like this is done. It's evidence that we have distinct long-term and short-term storage systems. It's an important piece of evidence. There was people that argued, oh, we don't really have a separate short-term and long-term memory. They're just both the same memory system. But it's without two separate systems, it's hard to explain this result. So the way the study works is that subjects are told to try to remember a list of words, and then the words are presented to a subject every 1 or 2 seconds, either visually or verbally. So you might be hearing them or you might be seeing them. So if you're in the study, and you know ahead of time, you have to remember the words. So the first word comes dog, let's say, and then shoe, and then tree, cloud, so it would be like that. Like there's a word presented every second or two. And at the right after they either read or hear the last word in the list, they have to try to recall as many of the words as they can. Like, immediately it's kind of like a light goes on or something, and then they start recalling words. So right after the last word was presented. And you get this effect where, this shows, like what percentage of people are recalling, each word based on the order of the list. And you can see that words at the beginning of the list, the primacy effect, are remembered better than words in the middle of the list. And then words at the very end of the list are also remembered better. And this demonstrates the two different memory systems. Because the primacy effect, they were the ones you heard longest ago. So, like, why do people remember those best? Well, they're more likely to be encoded in long-term memory. Why? Because they were probably rehearsed the most. Like, imagine you're in the study and you hear the first word dog, so you start saying to yourself, dog, 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 because you have to remember it. And then you hear shoe, and so what are you likely to do? You're probably going to yourself, dog, shoe, dog, shoe, dog, shoe. And then you hear a tree, dog, shoe, tree, dog, shoe, tree. And then you hear a cloud, dog, shoe, tree, cloud. And you probably try to keep this up because you want to remember them all. And, but you can see there's like, 25 words or whatever in the list. certainly over 20 words, and there's no way you're going to remember them all. But those ones at the beginning, like you probably stood the word dog to yourself, if that was the first word, like more than any other word, because it was at the beginning. So you were saying dog, 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 dog shoe, tree, dog, and so they got rehearsed more, and they were more likely to make it to your long-term storage. The ones at the very end of the list, well, you didn't have time to rehearse them. They just appeared like, like maybe a second or two before the light came on and you had to recall words. So what happens is you do well on those ones because they're in your short-term memory still. Remember, your short-term storage could last up to 20 seconds. So, a number of the words at the end you've just recently heard seconds ago. And so those are fresh. I mean, so those are still in short-term storage. And what, take my word, like you can't explain this result if short-term and long-term was just one memory system. That like if there's just one system that worked, a certain way for memory, like you have to have the two different systems in order to get this kind of result. And so it was very important to demonstrate that we have two different memory sets, well, we also have sensory storage, but we have these two different types of memories, long-term and short-term memory, that do different things. And anyways, so that's once again called the serial position effect. Okay. How we store our experiences in memory depends on our interpretations and expectations of them. We use schemas, which are organized knowledge structures, or sometimes they're referred to as mental models that we stored in memory. Like, so I talked about this in another learning objective. So like, I have a dog schema. If I think about what dog is, I think 4 legs and it barks and has a tail and fur and might lick you or bite you. Anyways, like it's kind of an organized, once again, it's an organized knowledge structure. And we use our schemas to, make sense of the world. So schemas give us frames of reference and allow us to interpret new situations. You come across a creature, you use your schema to determine that's a dog or that's a cat or that's an elephant. And you use your schemas to, for new situations. So you walk into a brand new classroom for the first time, you rely on what you know of all of your other experiences of walking into classrooms. You have a walking into classroom schema, basically, like what's expected. I need to find a seat. I need to, get ready to take notes. And so we use our schemas all the time to help us with new situations. And anyways, you might find it difficult to, let me zoom in here. You might find it difficult to explain this photo here, a bunch of plants, in a listening to classical music, because it doesn't fit your schema. This is not what you think of when you think of a classical music concert. But if you find out some details, then you can kind of fit it into your knowledge base. You can attach it to some existing schemas, and it becomes more memorable. So if I tell you that this took place in June 2020, it was in Barcelona, Spain, and this was during the COVID-19 crisis, and these musicians played to these plants, and then these plants were later given to healthcare workers. So when you think about that, it makes more sense. Oh, okay, this was, they couldn't have a real audience because of COVID, and they wanted to help, to show appreciation for the healthcare workers, and so they played music to the plants and gave the plants away. So like it was and then you think of that, it's like, oh, okay, I get it now, and you can fit it. Now it fits and it attaches to your COVID scheme and your healthcare worker scheme, and it, and it attaches to things that are already in your memory, and it gives you a place to fit this new piece of information. Okay. Okay. So association networks are this is kind of our current conception of the storage of memory. The meaning of information is organized in long-term storage based on networks of associations according to spreading activation models of memory. Information that is heard or seen activates specific nodes for memories in long-term storage. So let me zoom in here. So an item's characteristics and associates are strongly linked to it. So the concept of fire engine is strongly linked to the color red, because fire engines are always red, at least in our country. And so those two concepts would have, a strong attachment within your memory. If you activate fire engine, like the concept of red, the color red, will automatically be activated as well. Activating one node increases the likelihood that closely associated nodes will also be activated. And the farther the nodes, the weaker the activation will be. So, there will be a different strength of connection between, every concept that's related. And this is obviously a very simplistic diagram because there would be, thousands of things that are linked to the color red. And there'd be, thousands of things that are linked to the concept of vehicle, for instance. And anyways, but this is the idea. And when it's a more efficient way of storing things in memory. Let me explain what I mean. Like, if I ask you to describe, what a fire engine, tell me about your concept of fire engine, like you would talk about how it's a safe, it's an emergency vehicle, it carries people on it, they go to put out fires or to help people, and it's the truck is red, and and you would have a number of details about it. And then if I ask you to describe a cherry, you would say, it's a type of fruit, it's sweet, it's got a pit in it, it's colored red, anyways. Now, when you think about your memory, and I think about my concept of cherry, like I kind of picture like I got this like little area that where I've got the concept cherry with all these details kind of listed under it, and I have this concept somewhere out in my mind of fire engine with all these details under it, but I don't have what this model shows and demonstrates is that I don't have the color red in two different locations. I don't have it with the concept of fire engine and also with the concept of cherry and also with the concept of rose and also with the concept of apple. Or it's red is I have the color red stored in one nodule in my brain. And so when I think of fire engine, that activates because it's a strong association. And you asked me to describe a fire engine, like the color red is going to get activated. You asked me to describe a cherry, the color red is going to get activated. So I don't repeat, concepts just because they apply to many things. Like everything that's red, I don't have the, a little red nodule attached to everything that's red. I have one red nodule that is like linked to all of them. So red is only stored in one place. So when you describe a dog and it has four legs and it has fur and it's got tail, and then you have to describe a cat and it's got four legs and it's got fur and it's got tail. The concepts fur and tail and four legs, like they're going to be attached to each of those animals, and as well to many other animals, that have four legs or a tail or have fur, and this kind of goes against the way most people think of their memories. You kind of think that all the details surrounding some concept, like would all be gathered together into one little tiny spot. This is I have a concept of dog and it's located right here in my mind. It's like no, it's spread all over. Fur is over here, and tail is over here, and legs is over here, and the number four is over here, and barks is over here, and you think of dog, and it just because it has strong links to all those, it activates all those relating details of what a dog is. And then when I activate cat, it's going to activate some of the same ones, but it wouldn't activate barks obviously, but it would activate meows, so this is kind of the conception of how memory is stored, and it kind of goes against most people's like the way they think of their mind, they kind of think of all the details really gathered together, and it's really not. It's all about connections between different concepts, um, and so when you know this, it can help you. Like, let's say you're having trouble remembering a name or a term. If you think of something that's closely related, then activation will spread from that thing that's related to the term or the name that you're trying to remember. And this activation will make it easier to recall. So, like, I don't know, this is a pretty simplistic diagram here. It would be hard to forget some of these things. Like, let me use a different example. Let's say I'm trying to remember the name of an actor, and I think, oh, what's his name? Like, it's escaped me. So if I all of a sudden think of some movies that he was in, oh yeah, he was in Top Gun and he was in Mission Impossible. Then I know in my brain that when I activate those concepts, Top Gun, Mission Impossible, they're going to send activation to the name I was looking for, Tom Cruise in this case, because I know that there's going to be strong connections between those because he was in both those, movie franchises. And anyway, so it is something to think about. It is something I use when I'm missing a term. I try to think of something related, and a lot of times that's going to help activate what you're looking for. Okay, and that will conclude learning objective 3.